Cultural greetings around the world.
Listen and practice.
Hi. How do people greet each other in your country?
In Japan, we bow to show respect. It's quite different from handshakes.
That's interesting. Do people bow everywhere, even at work?
Yes, we bow at work, at home, and even when meeting friends. The depth of the bow shows how formal the greeting is.
Oh, I see. In my country, we usually shake hands or just say hi casually. Do people bow to say goodbye too?
Yes, we also bow when saying goodbye. But if it's more casual, a small nod is enough.
I think I'd feel awkward at first. How long do you hold the bow?
Just for a second or two. It's not very long, but it shows respect.
I'd like to try that. What about when meeting someone for the first time?
For first-time meetings, a deep bow is very polite, but younger people often bow lightly.
That's so different from where I come from. What if you meet someone you really admire?
Then we bow even deeper. The more respect, the deeper the bow.
In some cultures, people hug, but I guess that's not common in Japan.
No, hugging is quite rare, especially in public. It's seen as a bit too personal.
I can understand that. Handshakes and hugs are so normal where I live. I guess each culture has its way.
Exactly. But I think it's fun to learn different customs. Every culture has something unique.
I agree. I'll have to remember to bow when I visit Japan.
Yes, give it a try. It will definitely impress people.
Understanding different body language.
Listen and practice.
Do you think body language means the same thing in every culture?
Not really. In my country, Egypt, some gestures have very different meanings.
Oh, like what? Can you give me an example?
Sure. In Egypt, nodding your head up means no, and nodding down means yes. It's the opposite of many places.
Wow, that could be confusing. I'd probably get it wrong all the time.
It takes some practice, but people understand if you're not familiar with the custom.
What about eye contact? Is it polite to look someone in the eye?
In most situations, yes, but staring too long can be uncomfortable. It's better to balance.
In my culture, making direct eye contact shows confidence. But I've heard that in some cultures it can be rude.
That's true. In some places, like in parts of Asia, avoiding eye contact can show respect.
I see. So you really have to be careful depending on where you are.
Exactly. Body language can say a lot, even if you don't speak the same language.
That's why it's so fascinating. Do people in Egypt use a lot of hand gestures when talking?
Yes, we use our hands quite a bit, especially when we're excited or passionate about something.
That's similar to my culture, too. We use gestures to emphasize our words.
It's amazing how body language is both similar and different at the same time.
Asking about cultural traditions.
Listen and practice.
What kind of cultural traditions do you have in your country?
In India, we celebrate a lot of festivals. One of the biggest is Diwali, the Festival of Lights.
I've heard of that. How do you celebrate it?
We light oil lamps, set off fireworks, and exchange sweets with family and friends. It's a time of joy.
That sounds beautiful. Does everyone celebrate it the same way?
Mostly, but each region might have its own unique customs. Some focus more on prayers, others on decorations.
I love learning about festivals. Do you wear special clothes during Diwali?
Yes, we often wear new traditional clothes. It's a way to welcome prosperity and happiness.
That makes sense. In my culture, we don't have many festivals like that. I think it's wonderful to celebrate together.
It really is. Diwali brings people together, no matter where they are.
Are there any special foods you eat during the festival?
Oh yes, we have sweets like laddus and barfis, and also spicy snacks. Every family has its favorites.
I'd love to try those someday. Festivals like Diwali seem like a great way to keep traditions alive.
Exactly. They connect us to our roots and remind us of our shared history.
I agree. Celebrations really help people bond and remember what's important.
Yes, and even though traditions change a bit over time, the spirit remains the same.
Celebrating global festivals.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever celebrated any festivals from other countries?
Yes, in Mexico, we celebrate Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. It's one of our most famous festivals.
I've seen pictures of that. It looks so colorful. What's it all about?
It's a time to remember and honor our loved ones who have passed away. We believe their spirits visit us.
That's such a beautiful idea. How do people celebrate it?
We create altars with photos, flowers, and their favorite foods. We also visit cemeteries and decorate the graves.
Wow, it sounds like a real family event. Is it a happy celebration or a sad one?
It's more of a joyful remembrance. We celebrate their lives instead of mourning their loss.
I love that approach. It's so different from how we usually view death in my country.
Yes, many people are surprised by how festive it is. We use bright colors, music, and dance.
That's amazing. It really makes you feel connected to those who have passed.
Exactly. It's a way to show that they're always with us, even if they're gone.
I think we could learn something from that. Celebrating life instead of focusing on the sadness.
Definitely. It's a comforting tradition that brings families together every year.
I'd love to see it in person someday. It must be a powerful experience.
You should. The energy is incredible, and the streets come alive with color and music.
Discussing cultural etiquette.
Listen and practice.
When you travel, do you ever worry about breaking cultural etiquette?
Yes, especially when I visit countries like South Korea. Their etiquette can be quite formal.
Oh, I've heard that. What kind of things do you have to be careful about?
For one, you always have to use both hands when giving or receiving something. It's a sign of respect.
That's good to know. I'd probably forget and just use one hand.
It happens, but people are usually understanding if you're not familiar with the customs.
Are there other things to watch out for?
Yes, when eating, it's polite to wait for the eldest person to start before you eat. It shows respect for your elders.
Interesting. In my country, we just start when the food is served. No special rules like that.
It's all about respect for age and hierarchy. Even small gestures can mean a lot.
I guess it shows how different cultures value things in their own way.
Exactly. Understanding these customs helps build good relationships.
That's true. I always try to research etiquette before visiting a new place.
That's a smart move. It shows that you care about the culture and want to be respectful.
I agree. Being aware of these small things can make a big difference when you travel.
Absolutely. People appreciate it when you try to follow their customs, even if you make mistakes.
Differences in dining etiquette.
Listen and practice.
Dining etiquette can be so different around the world. How is it in your country?
In France, meals are very formal. There are many rules, especially for table manners.
I've heard that French people take their meals seriously. What's one rule I should know?
Never start eating until everyone is served, and you should say bon appetit before you begin.
That sounds polite. In my country, we don't have a specific phrase like that before eating.
It's considered polite to wish everyone a good meal. It's a small but important gesture.
I see. Is there anything else I should be careful about at a French table?
Yes, avoid placing your hands in your lap. Keep them on the table, but without your elbows touching it.
Oh, that's the opposite of what we do. We're told to keep our hands off the table.
It's funny how something so simple can be so different in another culture, right?
Definitely. Are meals long in France? I've heard they can last for hours.
Yes, meals are more than just eating. It's about conversation, enjoying the food, and spending time together.
That sounds lovely. In my country, we tend to eat quickly and move on.
It's the opposite in France. We enjoy taking our time and appreciating the experience.
I like that approach. I'll have to remember these rules when I visit France someday.
You'll fit right in. Just remember to relax and enjoy the moment.
Talking about national holidays.
Listen and practice.
Do you have any big national holidays in your country?
Yes, in Brazil we celebrate Carnival. It's a huge festival with parades, music, and dancing.
That sounds fun. How long does Carnival last?
It usually lasts for about a week, but the celebrations can go on for longer in some places.
We don't have anything like that in my country. Is it just in one city or all over Brazil?
It's celebrated all over Brazil, but the biggest parties are in Rio de Janeiro and Salvador.
I've seen pictures of the parades. The costumes are amazing.
Yes, people spend months preparing for the parades. It's a really colorful and exciting time.
Do people get time off work for Carnival?
Yes, most people get a few days off, and schools are usually closed for the whole week.
That's nice. In my country, we don't have many holidays where everyone gets time off.
Carnival is special. It's a time for everyone to relax, enjoy, and celebrate together.
I'd love to experience it someday. What's your favorite part of the festival?
My favorite part is the samba dancing. It's so energetic and full of life.
I'm not a great dancer, but I think I'd have fun watching.
You should try. Everyone joins in, even if they're not good at dancing. It's all about having fun.
Navigating cross-cultural friendships.
Listen and practice.
Do you think it's hard to maintain friendships with people from different cultures?
It can be challenging, but I think it's very rewarding. I'm from Kenya, and I have friends from many countries.
That's great. What kind of challenges have you faced?
Sometimes it's hard to understand different cultural habits, like being on time or how we communicate.
I've noticed that too. In my culture, being late is considered rude, but I know it's different in other places.
Yes, in Kenya, being a little late is not a big deal. It's more relaxed, but that can cause misunderstandings.
I guess the key is to be patient and open-minded, right?
Exactly. You need to be willing to learn about each other's customs and habits.
Do you think it's easier to become friends if you speak the same language?
It helps, but I think body language and attitude are more important. People can connect in many ways.
That's true. Sometimes actions speak louder than words.
Yes, and a positive attitude can overcome language barriers. Friendships are about respect and trust.
I agree. It's always interesting to learn new things from friends who have different backgrounds.
That's one of the best parts. You get to see the world from a new perspective.
Work culture in different countries.
Listen and practice.
Have you noticed any big differences in work culture between countries?
Yes, I'm from Germany, and in my country, work is very organized and punctual.
I've heard that Germans are very focused on efficiency. Is that true?
Yes, we like to keep things on schedule and make sure everything is planned out in advance.
That's quite different from my country. In the US, work can sometimes be a bit more flexible.
I've noticed that. Flexibility can be good, but I think structure helps keep things running smoothly.
That makes sense. Do you also have long working hours, or is there a good work-life balance?
In Germany, we try to balance work and personal life. Most people finish work by 5 or 6 p.m.
That sounds healthy. In my culture, some people work late into the night.
It's important to have time for yourself and your family. It helps you stay productive in the long run.
I agree. Taking breaks is important, but sometimes it's hard to switch off from work.
That's true. But in Germany, we really value our free time. Weekends are for relaxing.
I think we could learn from that. Do you take long vacations too?
Yes, most people get about 30 days of vacation per year. We believe rest is essential.
How to address someone in another culture.
Listen and practice.
When you meet someone new in your culture, how do you address them?
In China, it's polite to use titles and family names like Mr. Li or Ms. Zhang. especially in formal settings.
That's good to know. In my culture, we usually go straight to first names, even in casual situations.
Yes, I've noticed that. In China, using first names right away can feel a bit too personal.
I see. So it's better to wait until they tell you to use their first name?
Exactly. Once you become friends or more comfortable, then first names are fine.
I'll remember that. Are there different rules for how you address someone older or more senior?
Yes, for older people or higher ranking colleagues, we often add a title like teacher or manager before their name.
That's interesting. In my culture, we don't have as many formal titles. We just add Mr. or Mrs.
Titles show respect in our culture. It's a way to acknowledge someone's status or experience.
I like that. It makes the interaction more respectful.
Yes, it's a way to maintain harmony and avoid being too casual too soon.
I'll be careful with that when I visit China.
It's important to get these things right.
People will appreciate your effort. It shows you respect their culture.
Understanding different time zones.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever had trouble with time zones when working with people from other countries?
Oh, yes, I'm from India, and when I work with people in the US, the time difference is a big challenge.
I can imagine. How do you manage meetings when there's such a big time gap?
We usually have to schedule meetings late at night or early in the morning to make it work for both sides.
That sounds tough. Do you ever miss meetings because of a time difference?
It's happened a few times, especially when we forget about daylight saving changes.
We have that problem too. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of when it changes.
Yes, it can be confusing, but with good communication, we can usually figure it out.
I guess it's important to double-check the time before every meeting.
Definitely. It's always a good idea to confirm the time and mention the time zone clearly.
Do you use any tools to help manage the different time zones?
Yes, we use apps like World Clock or Google Calendar to avoid mistakes. They're really helpful.
That's smart. It must make things a lot easier.
It does. You just need to be flexible and plan ahead when working across time zones.
Respecting personal space in cultures.
Listen and practice.
How much personal space do people need in your culture?
In Russia, people like to keep a bit of distance, especially when meeting someone for the first time.
That's interesting. In my culture, people often stand quite close, especially during casual conversations.
Yes, I've noticed that. In Russia, standing too close can feel uncomfortable or too personal.
I can see how that could be. Do you shake hands when you meet someone new?
Yes, but it's a firm handshake, and we keep a little space between us while doing it.
That makes sense. In my country, people sometimes hug or even give a kiss on the cheek, depending on how close they are.
We don't usually hug or kiss unless we're very close to the person. Handshakes are more common.
I think I'd need to adjust if I visit Russia. I tend to be more touchy with friends.
People will understand, but it's always good to respect the local customs.
That's true. It's all about making people feel comfortable, right?
Exactly. Personal space is important, and everyone has different boundaries.
I'll remember that when traveling. It's important to respect those boundaries.
Yes, people will appreciate it when you're mindful of their comfort zones.
Sharing family traditions.
Listen and practice.
What's a special family tradition you have in your country?
In Nigeria, we have a tradition of gathering with extended family during Christmas. It's a big celebration.
That sounds lovely. What do you usually do during the celebration?
We cook traditional food, like jollof rice and fried plantains, and everyone brings something to share.
I've heard of jollof rice. I'd love to try it someday. Do you also exchange gifts?
Yes, we exchange small gifts, but the focus is more on spending time together as a family.
That's a nice way to celebrate. In my family, we always have a big meal for Christmas too.
It's similar for us. We believe in sharing food and spending time with loved ones.
I love that. Family traditions are so important. They bring people closer.
Yes, and even though some traditions have changed over time, we still keep the spirit alive.
Do you have any other traditions during the year?
Yes, we also have family gatherings during weddings and special occasions like naming ceremonies.
It must be wonderful to have such a strong sense of family connection.
It really is. Family is the core of our culture, and these traditions keep us united.
Gift-giving etiquette worldwide.
Listen and practice.
Is gift-giving common in your culture?
Yes, in Japan, we have a strong tradition of giving gifts, especially during certain times of the year.
I've heard that.
Are there any specific rules for giving gifts in Japan?
Yes, it's important to wrap the gift nicely, and the way you present it is just as important as the gift itself.
That's very thoughtful. In my culture, we also wrap gifts, but it's not as formal.
In Japan, we also give and receive gifts with both hands to show respect.
I see.
Is there a specific time when people exchange gifts?
Yes, during the new year, we give gifts called osaibo to show gratitude.
That's a nice tradition. Are there things you should avoid giving as gifts?
Yes, you should avoid giving things like knives or scissors, as they symbolize cutting ties.
That's good to know. I wouldn't want to make that mistake.
It's always a good idea to ask or check before giving a gift in another culture.
I agree. Gift-giving customs can be very different from place to place.
Yes, but as long as the gift is thoughtful, people will appreciate the effort.
Tipping practices in different countries.
Listen and practice.
Do people tip in your country?
No, in Australia, tipping isn't very common. We have a fair wage system, so it's not expected.
That's different from my country. In the US, tipping is a big part of the service industry.
I've heard that. Waiters and other service workers rely on tips there, right?
Yes, they do. It's normal to tip around 15 to 20% for good service.
That's a big difference. In Australia, we only tip if the service is exceptional.
So, if I visit Australia, I wouldn't need to tip at all?
Not really. Most places don't expect tips, and sometimes it can even be seen as unnecessary.
I think I'd still feel like I should leave something. It's so ingrained in our culture.
That's understandable. But in Australia, it's okay not to tip. Everyone gets paid fairly.
That's nice. It takes away some of the pressure when dining out.
Yes, it makes things more straightforward. You can just enjoy the meal without worrying about tipping.
Casual conversations across cultures.
Listen and practice.
What do people usually talk about when they meet casually in your country?
In Italy, we often talk about food, family, and soccer. Those are the big topics.
That sounds fun. Food is always a good topic. What's your favorite Italian dish to talk about?
Probably pasta. Everyone has their favorite type, and we love discussing how it's made.
I'd fit right in. I love pasta too. Do people talk about work in casual conversations?
Sometimes, but it's more common to talk about personal interests. Work conversations are usually kept for formal settings.
That's similar to my culture. We try to keep things light and avoid too much work talk.
Yes, casual conversations are meant to relax and connect with others.
I like that.
It's good to keep things friendly and easygoing.
Exactly. It helps build stronger relationships when the conversation isn't too serious.
What about weather? That's always a safe topic in my culture.
Yes, weather comes up a lot too, especially when it's really hot or cold. It's an easy way to start a conversation.
I agree. It's something everyone can relate to.
Yes, it's a good way to break the ice, especially when meeting someone new.
Discussing local customs.
Listen and practice.
What's an interesting local custom in your country?
In Turkey, we have a tradition of offering tea to guests as a sign of hospitality.
That sounds lovely. Is it something you do every time someone visits?
Yes, it's very common. Even if the visit is short, we always offer tea to make guests feel welcome.
In my country, We usually offer coffee or water, but it's not a must.
Tea is a big part of our culture. It's seen as a way to relax and connect with people.
I like that. It feels more personal. Is there a special way to serve the tea?
Yes, we serve it in small tulip-shaped glasses, and it's usually very strong and sweetened with sugar.
I'd love to try that. Do people ever refuse the tea?
It's considered polite to accept at least one glass. Refusing might seem a little rude.
That's good to know. In my culture, people can refuse drinks without any issue.
It's just one of our traditions. But of course, people will understand if you're not used to it.
I'll definitely keep that in mind when visiting Turkey.
Yes, you'll impress people if you enjoy a cup of tea with them.
Handling misunderstandings in communication.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever experienced misunderstandings when talking to people from other cultures?
Yes, in Brazil, we use a lot of expressions and gestures that might confuse foreigners.
Oh, really? Like what?
For example, when we say no with a finger wag, it can look like we're just pointing.
That could definitely cause confusion. In my culture, we just say no with words, no hand gestures.
Yes, sometimes body language speaks louder than words in Brazil, but it can lead to misunderstandings.
Have you had any major miscommunications because of this?
Once, I was talking to someone from Europe, and they misunderstood a hand gesture I made as being rude.
Oh no. How did you resolve that?
I quickly explained that it wasn't meant to be offensive, and they understood once I clarified.
That's good. I think it's important to be patient and ask if something is unclear.
Exactly. Most misunderstandings can be cleared up with a little explanation.
I agree. Communication is more than just words. It's about understanding each other's intentions.
Yes, and being open-minded helps prevent small mistakes from becoming bigger problems.
Comparing education systems.
Listen and practice.
What's the education system like in your country?
In South Korea, education is very competitive, especially during high school. Students work long hours to prepare for university entrance exams.
That sounds intense. In my country, school is important, but it's more balanced with extracurricular activities.
We also have extracurriculars, but academics take priority. Parents and teachers put a lot of pressure on students.
I can see how that would be stressful. Do students have time for hobbies?
Some do, but most focus on their studies. It's common for students to go to after-school academies called hagwons.
Wow, that's a lot of studying. In my country, we try to balance school with personal development.
That sounds healthier. Many students in South Korea feel overwhelmed by the pressure.
I can imagine. Do you think the system is effective?
It's effective in terms of academic results, but it can be tough on students' mental health.
That's a challenge. In my country, there's more emphasis on creativity and critical thinking.
That's becoming more popular in South Korea too, but the focus is still mainly on test scores.
I think a balance between both approaches would be ideal.
Yes, I agree. Education should prepare students for life, not just exams.
Talking about different food cultures.
Listen and practice.
What's your favorite food from your culture?
I'm from Mexico, and I love tacos. They're a staple of our cuisine, and there are so many varieties.
Tacos are popular in my country too, but I bet they taste different in Mexico.
Yes, authentic Mexican tacos are often much simpler, with just a few ingredients like meat, onions, and cilantro.
That sounds delicious. In my country, we tend to add a lot of toppings.
That's interesting. In Mexico, we usually keep it simple, but the salsas are very important for flavor.
I'd love to try real Mexican salsa. Is it always spicy?
Not always, but many salsas are spicy. There are also mild options, so there's something for everyone.
I think I could handle the spice. Do you make tacos at home often?
Yes, they're easy to make, and each region in Mexico has its own special type of taco.
That's so cool. In my country, we don't have such a strong regional food culture.
Mexico has a rich food culture, and tacos are just the beginning. There's so much variety.
I'll definitely try more Mexican dishes when I get the chance.
You won't be disappointed. Mexican food is full of flavor and tradition.
Addressing elders in various cultures.
Listen and practice.
How do you address elders in your culture?
In Nigeria, we show great respect to elders by addressing them with titles like uncle or auntie, even if they're not family.
That's interesting. In my culture, we mostly use Mr. or Mrs. for older people we don't know well.
Yes, in Nigeria, it's a way of showing respect and acknowledging their wisdom and experience.
Do you always have to use these titles?
Yes, it's very common. Not using a title can come across as disrespectful, especially in formal situations.
I see. In my culture, we sometimes call older people by their first names if they prefer it.
That would be unusual in Nigeria. Respecting hierarchy and age is very important in our society.
That makes sense. I think showing respect to elders is something every culture values, but in different ways.
Exactly. It's one of those cultural differences that can be small but important to understand.
I'll keep that in mind. It's good to know how to address people properly in different cultures.
Yes, and people will appreciate it when you show respect for their traditions.
Celebrating birthdays in other countries.
Listen and practice.
How do people celebrate birthdays in your country?
In Germany, birthdays are a big deal. We often have parties with family and friends, and the person celebrating their birthday brings cake to work or school.
That's interesting. In my country, the person celebrating usually gets treated by others.
Yes, in Germany, the birthday person is expected to bring something for everyone, especially cake.
I like that tradition. What kind of cake is typical for birthdays in Germany?
One of the most popular is Schwarzwälder Kirschtorte, or Black Forest cake, with cherries and whipped cream.
That sounds amazing. Do people give a lot of gifts too?
Yes, gifts are usually given by close family and friends, but it's not as formal as Christmas.
In my country, birthdays can be very casual depending on the person. Some people don't even celebrate.
In Germany, most people celebrate, but the way they do it varies. Some prefer big parties, others keep it small.
I think that's the same everywhere. It depends on the person's personality.
Exactly. But no matter how it's celebrated, birthdays are a time to enjoy with loved ones.
Holidays in a global workplace.
Listen and practice.
How do you handle holidays in a global workplace?
In India, we have many different religious holidays, so in some workplaces, people take turns celebrating their festivals.
That sounds fair. In my country, most holidays are Christian, so they're the standard days off.
In India, it's more diverse. People from different backgrounds get to celebrate their own holidays.
I think that's great. It respects everyone's traditions.
Yes, but it can be tricky to manage in a global company where not everyone celebrates the same holidays.
I can see that.
Do you get time off for all the major holidays in India?
It depends on the company. Some offer flexible holidays where employees can choose which ones to take.
That's smart. It allows people to celebrate what's important to them.
Yes, and it creates a more inclusive work environment where everyone feels respected.
I agree. It's important for companies to recognize the cultural diversity of their employees.
Absolutely. It helps build a positive and understanding workplace culture.
Cultural perspectives on punctuality.
Listen and practice.
How important is punctuality in your culture?
In Switzerland, being on time is very important. People expect you to arrive exactly at the agreed time.
That's what I've heard. In my culture, there's a bit more flexibility with time.
Yes, in Switzerland, even being a few minutes late can be seen as disrespectful.
That's strict. In my country, people often arrive 5 to 10 minutes late without much concern.
It's interesting how different cultures see time. In Switzerland, time is seen as something valuable.
I can understand that.
Do people expect punctuality in all situations?
Yes, whether it's for business meetings or social gatherings, being on time shows respect for others.
I'll have to be extra careful about that if I visit Switzerland.
People will definitely appreciate it if you're punctual. It's a way to make a good impression.
It's fascinating how such a small thing can have such a big cultural meaning.
Yes, time is one of those cultural elements that varies a lot between countries.
Navigating different dress codes.
Listen and practice.
Are dress codes important in your culture?
In Saudi Arabia, yes, modesty is very important, especially in public spaces.
I've heard that.
So, are there specific guidelines people have to follow?
Yes, women often wear an abaya, and men wear a thobe. It's important to cover the body respectfully.
That's quite different from my country, where the dress code is much more relaxed.
Yes, in Saudi Arabia, what you wear reflects respect for cultural and religious values.
I think that's very meaningful. Do visitors have to follow the same dress code?
Visitors are expected to dress modestly as well, especially when in public places or religious sites.
I see. It's good to be respectful of the local customs when traveling.
Exactly. People appreciate it when visitors make an effort to understand and follow the dress code.
I agree. It shows that you're respecting the culture.
Yes, and it's important to be aware of these differences to avoid misunderstandings.
How to make small talk in other cultures.
Listen and practice.
What topics are common for small talk in your country?
In Spain, we often talk about family, food, and football. Those are safe topics to start a conversation.
I love talking about food. In my country, people often talk about the weather.
We also talk about the weather, especially in the summer when it gets very hot.
I guess some topics are universal. Do people avoid any topics in small talk?
Yes, we try to avoid politics and religion, especially with people we don't know well.
That's the same in my culture. It's better to keep things light.
Exactly. Small talk is meant to be friendly and help people get to know each other.
Do you think people are open to talking to strangers in Spain?
Yes, people are generally friendly, especially in cafes or social settings.
That's nice. In my culture, people are more reserved, but once you start talking, they open up.
It's interesting how different cultures approach small talk, but the goal is the same everywhere.
Explaining superstitions.
Listen and practice.
Are there any common superstitions in your country?
Yes, in Russia, one of the most common is that you shouldn't whistle indoors because it's believed to bring bad luck.
That's interesting. In my country, people say that walking under a ladder brings bad luck.
We have something similar, but whistling is definitely one of the big ones in Russia.
I'll make sure not to whistle if I ever visit. Do people really believe in these superstitions?
Some do, especially older generations, but many people just follow them out of habit.
That makes sense. In my culture, some superstitions are more like traditions now.
Yes, they become part of everyday life, even if people don't take them seriously.
Do you have any superstitions related to good luck?
Yes, if you spill salt, it's considered bad luck, but if you throw a pinch of it over your shoulder, it brings good luck.
That's similar to what we believe. It's funny how superstitions can be so different, yet so alike.
Yes, it shows how cultures can have their own ways of explaining the unknown.
Gestures that mean different things.
Listen and practice.
Do hand gestures mean different things in your culture?
Yes, in Greece, showing the palm of your hand, like a stop sign, is considered rude.
Really? In my country, that's just a normal way to signal stop.
Yes, but in Greece, it's seen as disrespectful. You have to be careful with how you use your hands.
That's good to know. Are there any other gestures that have different meanings?
Yes, nodding your head up means no, and down means yes. It's the opposite of many other places.
That could be confusing for visitors. I'd probably make mistakes.
It happens a lot, but once you know the gestures, it's easier to avoid misunderstandings.
I agree. Gestures are such a big part of communication, and they vary so much between cultures.
Exactly. Something that's normal in one place can mean something completely different somewhere else.
Discussing sports from different cultures.
Listen and practice.
What's the most popular sport in your country?
In Argentina, football, soccer, is by far the most popular sport. People are passionate about it.
I've heard that.
Football is also big in my country, but not as much as in Argentina, I think.
Yes, it's almost like a religion for some people. The matches bring everyone together.
That's amazing. Do people play football regularly, or is it mostly about watching the games?
Both. People love playing and watching, especially when the national team is involved.
In my country, we have a lot of different popular sports, like basketball and baseball.
Those are growing in popularity in Argentina, but football will always be number one.
I can understand that. It's such a global sport.
Yes, it connects people from all over the world, and in Argentina, it's part of our identity.
How to apologize across cultures.
Listen and practice.
How do people apologize in your culture?
In Japan, apologizing is taken very seriously. People often bow deeply to show sincerity.
That's very formal. In my culture, we usually just say, I'm sorry, and that's it.
In Japan, it's more about showing respect and acknowledging the mistake in a humble way.
I think that's a good way to apologize. It shows that you're really sorry.
Yes, the bow is important, and the deeper the bow, the more sincere the apology.
I can see how that would make a big difference. Do people apologize a lot in Japan?
Yes, even for small things. It's considered polite to apologize, even if the mistake wasn't very big.
That's different from my culture. We only apologize for more serious things.
It's interesting how apologies vary. In Japan, it's about maintaining harmony in relationships.
Discussing religious holidays.
Listen and practice.
Do you celebrate any religious holidays in your country?
Yes, in Indonesia, we celebrate Eid al-Fitr, which marks the end of Ramadan. It's one of the biggest holidays.
That's wonderful. How do people celebrate it?
We start with prayers, and then families gather to share a big meal. It's a time for forgiveness and community.
I love that. It sounds like a very meaningful celebration.
Yes, it's a time to reconnect with family and friends and to help those in need.
In my country, Christmas is a big religious holiday. It's also focused on family and giving.
It's similar in many ways. Both holidays are about sharing joy and showing kindness.
I think all religious holidays have that in common. They bring people together.
Yes, they remind us of what's important in life, no matter where we're from.
Introducing yourself to someone from another culture.
Listen and practice.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Sarah. Where are you from?
Hi, I'm Ahmed. I'm from Egypt. It's nice to meet you too.
Egypt. That's amazing. I've always wanted to visit.
You should. We have so much history, and the pyramids are incredible to see.
I bet. So, what brought you here?
I came here to study. I'm doing my master's degree in engineering.
That's great. How are you finding it so far?
It's a bit different from home, but I'm enjoying it. People are very friendly here.
I'm glad to hear that. Do you miss anything about Egypt?
Yes, mostly the food and being with my family. But I'm getting used to things here.
I can imagine. It must be quite an adjustment.
Yes, but it's a good experience. I'm learning a lot about different cultures.
That's the best part of traveling, isn't it? You learn so much.
Exactly. It opens your mind to new ideas and ways of living.
Discussing multilingual workplaces.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever worked in a multilingual environment?
Yes, in India, we speak many languages, and at work, we often switch between Hindi and English.
That's so interesting. Do people usually mix languages during meetings?
Yes, it's common to mix languages depending on who's speaking. Some people are more comfortable in one language than the other.
That must be challenging to keep up with.
It can be, but we're used to it. Most people in India grow up speaking more than one language.
I see. In my workplace, we mainly speak English, but some people speak Spanish too.
It's great to have different languages at work. It makes communication more dynamic.
I agree. It also helps you learn new phrases from other languages.
Yes, and it helps build stronger connections between colleagues from different backgrounds.
Have you ever had any misunderstandings because of language differences?
Yes, sometimes things get lost in translation, but we usually laugh it off and clarify.
That's good. It's important to be patient in those situations.
Exactly. Multilingual workplaces can be challenging, but they're also very rewarding.
Food taboos in different cultures.
Listen and practice.
Are there any food taboos in your country?
Yes, in Thailand, it's considered rude to point at your food with your chopsticks.
Oh, that's interesting. In my culture, we don't have many rules like that.
In Thailand, we also avoid using our left hand to eat, as it's seen as unclean.
That's something I'll have to remember if I visit. Are there any foods that people don't eat?
Yes, many people in Thailand avoid eating beef because of religious reasons.
I didn't know that. In my country, people eat beef often.
It's all about respecting the beliefs and customs of the culture you're in.
Definitely. Every culture has its own unique food traditions.
Yes, and understanding them helps you avoid making mistakes when you travel.
I agree. It's fascinating how food is such a big part of cultural identity.
Exactly. Food brings people together, but it also reflects cultural values.
Comparing social norms.
Listen and practice.
What are some social norms in your country that might surprise people?
In Japan, we always take off our shoes before entering someone's home. It's a sign of respect.
That makes sense. In my country, we don't always do that, but it's becoming more common.
It's a long-standing tradition in Japan. We also bow when greeting people.
I've heard about that.
It's very formal compared to where I'm from.
Yes, respect is a big part of our social norms. We're taught to be polite in every situation.
That's great. In my culture, people are more casual, even when meeting someone new.
It's interesting how norms can be so different. In Japan, formality is important, especially with elders.
I can see how that would shape the way people interact.
Yes, but once you understand the norms, it becomes natural. It's all about showing respect.
That's true. Social norms help us know what's expected in different situations.
Exactly, and they change from place to place, which makes learning about them so interesting.
Differences in housing traditions.
Listen and practice.
What are homes like in your country?
In Morocco, traditional homes often have a courtyard in the middle, which is used for family gatherings.
That sounds beautiful. In my country, homes are usually just a series of rooms.
Yes, the courtyard is important in Moroccan homes. It's a space where the family comes together.
I love that idea. It makes the home feel more open and social.
Exactly. It's a place to relax and enjoy time with family, especially in the evenings.
Do most people live in houses with courtyards, or is that only in some areas?
It's more common in older homes and traditional neighborhoods. In cities, apartments are becoming more popular.
That's similar to my country. More people are living in apartments now.
Yes, times are changing, but many people still prefer the traditional style of housing.
I think it's important to keep those traditions alive, even as cities grow.
I agree. The traditional homes reflect our culture and way of life.
Compliments in different cultures.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your culture give compliments?
In Mexico, People often give compliments about appearance or food. It's a way to show appreciation.
That's nice. In my country, we also give compliments, but sometimes people feel embarrassed to receive them.
It's similar in Mexico. People appreciate compliments, but they might downplay them to be humble.
I've noticed that too. People say, oh, it's nothing, even if they're proud of it.
Yes, it's part of being polite. You don't want to seem too proud, even if you're happy with the compliment.
I like that. It shows humility. Do people give compliments often in Mexico?
Yes, especially when it comes to food. If you enjoy a meal, it's polite to compliment the cook.
That's a good way to show appreciation. In my culture, we often compliment people's work or effort.
That's important too. Compliments help build connections and make people feel valued.
Global perspectives on health.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country view health and wellness?
In China, traditional medicine is still very popular. Many people use herbs and acupuncture to stay healthy.
That's fascinating. In my country, we mostly rely on modern medicine, but alternative methods are becoming more popular.
Yes, in China, we believe in balancing the body's energy, or qi, to prevent illness.
I've heard about that.
It sounds like a more holistic approach to health.
It is. We focus on treating the root cause of problems, not just the symptoms.
That's different from how we approach health, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Both approaches have their strengths. It's good to combine modern and traditional methods.
I agree. It's important to find what works best for each person.
Exactly. Health is about balance, whether it's through medicine, diet, or lifestyle.
Discussing popular music worldwide.
Listen and practice.
What kind of music is popular in your country?
In Brazil, samba and bossa nova are very popular. They're part of our cultural identity.
I love samba. It's so lively and energetic.
Yes, it's the heartbeat of Brazil, especially during Carnival.
In my country, pop music is everywhere.
People listen to it all the time.
Pop music is popular in Brazil too, but we always go back to samba and bossa nova.
That's great. I think traditional music is important to keep alive.
Yes, it connects us to our roots. But Brazilian music is also evolving with new styles.
Music really does bring people together, no matter where you're from.
Exactly. It's a universal language that everyone can enjoy.
Talking about traditional clothing.
Listen and practice.
What traditional clothing do people wear in your country?
In India, we have many traditional clothes, but the sari for women and the kurta for men are the most well-known.
Saris are beautiful. Do people still wear them often?
Yes, especially for special occasions like weddings and festivals. They're an important part of our culture.
That's wonderful. In my country, traditional clothing is mostly worn for historical reenactments or festivals.
It's nice to see how traditional clothing varies across cultures. It tells a story about history and heritage.
I agree. Each piece of clothing has so much meaning behind it.
Exactly. The fabrics, colors, and designs all have cultural significance in India.
I think that's something we don't think about enough in modern fashion.
Yes, traditional clothing carries a lot of meaning, and it's important to preserve those traditions.
Different ways to show hospitality.
Listen and practice.
How do people show hospitality in your country?
In Greece, it's very common to offer food and drink to guests as soon as they arrive.
That sounds lovely. In my country, we also offer drinks, but not always food right away.
In Greece, it's a way of making guests feel welcome. Food is a big part of our culture.
I've heard Greek food is amazing. Do you cook for guests yourself?
Yes, it's common to cook homemade meals for guests. It shows care and effort.
That's wonderful. In my country, we often take guests out to eat instead.
That's nice too, but in Greece, we believe home-cooked meals are more personal.
I can see how that would make a guest feel very special.
Yes, it's all about making people feel comfortable and at home.
Talking about global education.
Listen and practice.
How is the education system in your country?
In Finland, our education system is quite unique. There's less focus on exams and more on creative learning.
That sounds great. In my country, there's a lot of focus on testing and grades.
Yes, in Finland, we believe that too much testing can limit students' creativity.
I agree. It's important for students to learn how to think, not just memorize facts.
Exactly. That's why we have shorter school days and more time for independent projects.
I think more countries could learn from Finland's approach. It sounds very balanced.
It works for us, but every country has its own challenges and needs in education.
True. Every system has room for improvement, but Finland sounds really inspiring.
Thank you. We're proud of it, and we hope it continues to evolve in a positive way.
Handshakes and other greetings.
Listen and practice.
How do people greet each other in your culture?
In South Africa, a handshake is the most common greeting, but we also have unique handshakes depending on the region.
That's cool. In my country, we just have one standard handshake, usually firm.
Yes, in South Africa, it can vary. Some regions add extra moves to the handshake.
I'd probably mess it up. Do people expect you to know all the different types?
Not really. People understand if you're not familiar with the customs. It's more important to be friendly and respectful.
That's good to know. I like learning about different ways people greet each other.
It's interesting how greetings can be so different around the world, yet they all show respect.
Exactly. A handshake says a lot about how people view formality and connection.
Yes, and it's a simple way to make a good first impression.
Humor in different cultures.
Listen and practice.
What kind of humor is popular in your country?
In the UK, we love dry humor and sarcasm. It's not always easy for people from other countries to understand.
I've heard that.
In my country, humor is more physical and exaggerated, like in Italy.
That's so different. British humor is more subtle, and sometimes people aren't sure if we're joking.
I think I'd struggle with that. I'm used to more obvious jokes.
Yes, British humor can be confusing, but once you get it, it's really funny.
I'll have to practice. Do people laugh at sarcasm easily?
Yes, but it depends on the person. Some people love it, while others might find it a bit rude.
That's interesting. Humor really does vary a lot between cultures.
Yes, but it's fun to learn how different cultures make people laugh. It shows a lot about their personality.
Describing a typical day in your country.
Listen and practice.
What's a typical day like in your country?
In Spain, people often start the day with a light breakfast, then take a break for lunch around 2 p.m. Lunch is the main meal.
That's very different from my country. We usually have a big breakfast and a lighter lunch.
Yes, in Spain, lunch is long and relaxed, often followed by a short rest or siesta.
I've heard about the siesta. Do most people still take a nap after lunch?
It's not as common anymore, but some people still enjoy a short rest if they can.
I think that's a great idea. It gives you energy for the rest of the day.
Exactly. After the siesta, we go back to work and usually have dinner late, around 9 or 10 p.m.
That's so late. In my culture, dinner is usually around 6 or 7 p.m.
Yes, but in Spain, the evenings are long and people like to stay up later.
I'd love to experience that lifestyle. It sounds more relaxed.
It is. Life in Spain is all about balance and enjoying each part of the day.
Discussing global political systems.
Listen and practice.
How does the political system work in your country?
In France, we have a semi-presidential system where the president and the prime minister share power.
That's interesting. In my country, the US, we have a full presidential system. The president has a lot of power.
Yes, in France, the president has a lot of power too, but the prime minister handles more day-to-day government tasks.
I see. Does that create any conflicts between the two roles?
Sometimes, especially if the president and the prime minister are from different political parties.
That must make things complicated. How are elections held in France?
We have 2 rounds of voting for the president. If no candidate wins a majority in the first round, the top 2 go to a second round.
That's different from the US, where we only have one election.
Yes, the 2-round system helps ensure that the president has broad support.
Do you think it works well for France?
I think it does. It allows people to rethink their choices after the first round.
That sounds like a good way to ensure people really think about their vote.
Yes, it helps create a more democratic system, in my opinion.
Gender roles in different cultures.
Listen and practice.
How are gender roles viewed in your country?
In Sweden, gender equality is a big priority. Men and women share responsibilities both at work and at home.
That's great. In my country, things are changing, but there are still more traditional gender roles in some areas.
Yes, it takes time. In Sweden, it's common for both parents to take parental leave after having a baby.
That's fantastic. In my country, maternity leave is more common than paternity leave.
It's seen as important for fathers to have time with their children too. It helps balance family life.
I agree. It's important for both parents to be involved.
Yes, and it also helps break the idea that certain roles are only for men or women.
Exactly.
How do you think Sweden has achieved this level of gender equality?
I think it's partly due to strong government policies and a cultural shift towards equality over many years.
That makes sense. Policies can really shape how people view gender roles.
Yes, but it also takes education and open discussions to change old habits.
Family structures around the world.
Listen and practice.
What is the typical family structure like in your country?
In South Korea, families are traditionally hierarchical, with respect given to elders, but this is changing with younger generations.
That's interesting. In my country, family structures can vary a lot, but many families are more equal in decision-making.
Yes, in South Korea, it's still common for the oldest male to have the most authority, but it's becoming less strict.
I've noticed that some cultures place a lot of importance on respecting elders.
Yes, in South Korea, respecting elders is very important. You always listen to the older members of the family.
That's a great value. In my culture, we respect our elders too, but it's more casual.
It's a strong tradition for us, but younger people are starting to question some of the strictness.
Change is always happening, isn't it? Families evolve over time.
Exactly. The modern world is changing family structures in many places, including South Korea.
I think it's important to keep a balance between tradition and modern values.
I agree. It's good to respect traditions, but also adapt to new ways of thinking.
Differences in parenting styles.
Listen and practice.
What are parenting styles like in your country?
In Japan, parents are often very involved in their children's education and discipline. They focus on teaching respect and responsibility.
That sounds very structured. In my country, parenting styles vary a lot, but there's a trend towards more relaxed, child-led approaches.
Yes, in Japan, discipline is seen as important, but parents also show a lot of care and attention to their children.
I think that balance is important. Do children have a lot of independence?
As they get older, yes. Many children in Japan walk to school by themselves from a young age.
That's impressive. In my culture, parents tend to be more protective.
It's common in Japan because safety is generally high and children are taught to be responsible.
I can see the benefits of that. It helps children become more independent.
Yes, it prepares them to be self-sufficient and respectful adults.
I think every culture can learn something from different parenting styles.
Absolutely. There's no one right way to parent, but we can all learn from each other.
Respecting different religious beliefs.
Listen and practice.
How are religious beliefs respected in your country?
In Indonesia, we have many religions, and it's important to respect all of them. The government recognizes 6 official religions.
That's great to hear. In my country, we have freedom of religion, but sometimes people still face discrimination.
Yes, there can be challenges, but overall, Indonesians are taught to live in harmony despite religious differences.
That's such a valuable lesson. Do people celebrate different religious holidays together?
Yes, during holidays like Eid or Christmas, it's common for neighbors of different faiths to visit each other and share food.
That's beautiful. In my country, some people do that, but it's not as common.
It helps build understanding and friendship between different communities.
I think the world could use more of that.
Yes, respecting religious beliefs is key to creating a peaceful society.
Definitely.
It's about respecting each other's choices and beliefs.
Exactly. Even if we don't share the same beliefs, we can still show respect.
Discussing age and respect across cultures.
Listen and practice.
How do people show respect for elders in your culture?
In Nigeria, respect for elders is very important. We use titles like sir or ma when addressing them, and we always listen to their advice.
That's a strong tradition. In my country, we respect elders, but it's less formal.
Yes, in Nigeria, formality is important. You would never call an elder by their first name unless they allow it.
That's a good way to show respect. Are there other customs related to age?
Yes, younger people are expected to greet elders first and offer them seats in crowded places.
That's nice. In my country, some of those customs still exist, but they're not as strict.
It's a part of our culture that emphasizes the wisdom and experience of older people.
I think that's something we could focus on more in my culture.
Every culture has its own way of showing respect, but the key is understanding and kindness.
Technology use in different countries.
Listen and practice.
How is technology used in your country?
In Singapore, technology is integrated into almost every aspect of life. People use apps for everything from paying bills to ordering food.
That's amazing. In my country, we use technology a lot too, but I don't think it's quite that advanced yet.
Singapore is very focused on being a smart nation. The government encourages everyone to use technology.
That sounds very efficient. Do older people use technology as much as younger people?
It's becoming more common. There are programs to help older generations learn how to use smartphones and apps.
That's great. In my country, older people sometimes struggle with new technology.
It's a challenge, but with support, they're becoming more comfortable with it.
I think technology can really improve people's lives when it's used correctly.
Yes, it makes things faster and easier, but there are also concerns about privacy and dependence.
Comparing work-life balance globally.
Listen and practice.
How is the work-life balance in your country?
In Denmark, work-life balance is very important. Most people leave work by 5 p.m., and we value time with family and friends.
That sounds ideal. In my country, work-life balance is harder to achieve. Many people work long hours.
Yes, in Denmark, we believe that life outside of work is just as important, if not more.
I completely agree. It's important to have time to relax and enjoy life.
Exactly. We also get generous vacation time, and it's encouraged to take it.
That's fantastic. In my country, some people feel guilty about taking time off.
That's a common issue in many places, but in Denmark, it's seen as necessary for well-being.
I think more countries should adopt that mindset.
Yes, it leads to happier and more productive employees in the long run.
Food markets around the world.
Listen and practice.
What are food markets like in your country?
In Vietnam, we have bustling outdoor markets where you can buy fresh produce, meat, and fish every day.
That sounds amazing. In my country, we have farmers markets, but they're only open on weekends.
In Vietnam, markets are open every day, and they're a big part of daily life. People prefer to buy fresh food daily.
I love that idea. It must feel more connected to the food you eat.
Yes, it's a tradition that has been passed down for generations. The markets are also a place to socialize.
That's wonderful. In my country, most people do their grocery shopping at large supermarkets.
We have supermarkets too, but many people still prefer the personal touch of the local markets.
I think I'd enjoy shopping at a local market. It feels more authentic.
You should try it if you visit Vietnam. The variety and freshness are incredible.
How to handle miscommunications.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever had a miscommunication when talking to someone from another culture?
Yes, once I was speaking to someone from the UK, and they used a lot of sarcasm, which I didn't understand at first.
That can definitely happen. In my country, sarcasm is very common, but I know it can be confusing.
Yes, I had to ask if they were serious or joking, and we laughed about it afterward.
It's good that you could laugh about it. Miscommunications are so common in cross-cultural conversations.
Yes, and the best way to handle them is to stay calm and ask for clarification.
I agree. It's better to ask than to assume the wrong thing.
Exactly. Most people are understanding if you ask them to explain what they mean.
It's all about being patient and open-minded.
Yes, and sometimes, miscommunications can lead to funny moments and help build connections.
Addressing gender equality in different cultures.
Listen and practice.
How is gender equality viewed in your country?
In Iceland, we've made a lot of progress. It's one of the top countries for gender equality.
That's impressive. In my country, we're still working on it, but things are improving.
Yes, in Iceland, we have equal pay laws and strong policies to support women in the workplace.
That's fantastic. Equal pay is still a big issue in my country.
It takes time, but with the right policies and awareness, things can change.
I think education is key to achieving real gender equality.
Yes, teaching people from a young age about equality makes a big difference.
It's good to see more countries focusing on this issue.
Absolutely. Gender equality benefits everyone, not just women.
How to discuss global issues.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country talk about global issues?
In Germany, people are very interested in global politics and often discuss climate change, immigration, and human rights.
That's great. In my country, we also talk about those issues, but opinions can be very divided.
Yes, it can be the same in Germany, but we try to have open discussions and listen to different viewpoints.
I think that's the key, being open to hearing other perspectives.
Exactly. Even if we don't agree, it's important to understand where others are coming from.
It's challenging, but necessary, especially with global issues.
Yes, and global problems need global solutions, which means working together.
I agree. It's important to stay informed and engaged with what's happening around the world.
Yes, the more we understand each other, the better we can solve these issues together.
Discussing career expectations worldwide.
Listen and practice.
What are career expectations like in your country?
In China, there's a lot of pressure to succeed, especially in fields like business and engineering. Many people work long hours to achieve their goals.
That sounds intense. In my country, people are also focused on success, but there's more emphasis on work-life balance.
Yes, in China, work is often the priority, especially for younger professionals trying to make their way.
I can understand that.
Do you think it's changing with younger generations?
Slowly, some younger people are starting to value balance more, but the pressure to succeed is still strong.
I think every country faces that balance between career success and personal life.
Yes, it's a challenge, but I think more people are realizing that both are important.
Global business etiquette.
Listen and practice.
What's business etiquette like in your country?
In Brazil, business is often very personal. We like to build strong relationships before moving forward with deals.
That's interesting. In my country, business can be more formal and focused on getting to the point quickly.
Yes, in Brazil, people prefer to have a conversation first, get to know each other, and then discuss business.
I like that approach. It feels more natural and less rushed.
Exactly. Trust is very important in Brazilian business culture, so we take the time to build it.
That's something my country could learn from. Building relationships is important in any business.
Yes, once trust is established, the rest of the process goes more smoothly.
Greeting customs around the world.
Listen and practice.
How do people greet each other in your country?
In Italy, we usually greet people with a kiss on both cheeks, even if we're meeting them for the first time.
That's so different from my culture, where we usually just shake hands.
Yes, in Italy, physical contact is more common, and it's seen as a warm and friendly gesture.
I think I'd feel awkward at first, but I get used to it.
Don't worry, Italians are very welcoming, and they understand if you're not used to it.
That's good to know. Do people greet each other this way in professional settings too?
In business, we tend to use handshakes, but in more casual settings, the cheek kisses are normal.
That makes sense. It's always important to adapt to local customs.
Exactly, and once you get the hang of it, it becomes natural.
Discussing global environmental issues.
Listen and practice.
Do you think climate change is affecting your country?
Yes, in Brazil, deforestation in the Amazon is a big issue. It affects the global climate, not just our country.
That's really concerning. In my country, we're seeing more extreme weather events like hurricanes.
It's scary how climate change is impacting everyone differently, but also connected globally.
Yes, I feel like we all need to do more to protect the environment.
I agree. In Brazil, there are efforts to reduce deforestation, but it's a long battle.
Do you think the government is doing enough?
It's complicated. Some policies help, but economic interests often conflict with environmental goals.
It's the same in my country. People want change, but businesses resist.
Yes, finding a balance between economy and environment is hard, but it's necessary.
What do you think individuals can do to help?
Simple things like reducing waste, using less plastic, and supporting eco-friendly policies can make a difference.
I try to do those things too, but sometimes it feels like a small drop in the ocean.
It might seem small, but if more people do it, it adds up. Collective action is powerful.
Discussing differences in government systems.
Listen and practice.
How does the government work in your country?
In South Africa, we have a parliamentary system with a president. It's a bit different from the US, where the president has more power.
That's interesting. In the US, the president is directly elected, but we also have a system of checks and balances.
In South Africa, the president is elected by the parliament, not directly by the people. It's more similar to some European systems.
Do you think that works well for your country?
It has its challenges, but it's designed to represent different regions and voices across the country.
That sounds fair. In my country, the president's power can sometimes feel too strong.
Yes, in South Africa, the parliament has a lot of control over government decisions, which keeps the balance.
I think balance is key in any government system. It prevents too much power in one place.
Exactly. Every system has its pros and cons, but representation is important.
Navigating international travel etiquette.
Listen and practice.
Do you think travel etiquette changes depending on the country?
Absolutely. In Japan, for example, it's important to be very quiet on public transportation.
That's good to know. In my country, people talk a lot, even on trains and buses.
Yes, in Japan, it's seen as polite to keep your voice down and respect others' space.
I've heard about that.
What about tipping in restaurants?
In Japan, tipping isn't common, and it can even be considered rude. The service charge is usually included in the bill.
That's so different from the US. We tip for almost everything.
Yes, it's important to research these customs before traveling. What's common in one country might be strange in another.
I agree. Understanding local customs can make the trip smoother and more enjoyable.
Exactly. It shows respect for the culture you're visiting, and people appreciate it.
Differences in wedding traditions.
Listen and practice.
What are weddings like in your country?
In India, weddings are usually big celebrations that last several days, with lots of family, food, and rituals.
That sounds amazing. In my country, weddings are usually just one day and much smaller.
Yes, Indian weddings are often very large, and the ceremonies can vary depending on the region and religion.
I've heard about the beautiful traditional clothing. Do people still wear those for weddings?
Yes, the bride usually wears a sari or lehenga, and the groom might wear a sherwani. The colors and designs are very important.
That sounds beautiful. In my country, most brides wear white, but it's more for tradition than anything else.
In India, the colors are symbolic, and red is a popular choice for brides because it represents prosperity and luck.
That's so interesting. I'd love to experience an Indian wedding someday.
You should. The energy, the food, the music. It's an unforgettable experience.
Talking about popular sports globally.
Listen and practice.
What's the most popular sport in your country?
In Spain, football, soccer, is by far the most popular sport. Everyone is passionate about it, especially during big tournaments.
I've noticed that.
Football is also big in my country, but not as much as it is in Spain.
Yes, in Spain, football is more than just a game. It brings people together, and there's a lot of pride in supporting your local team.
That's great. Do people also play a lot of football, or is it mostly just watching the games?
Both. Children grow up playing football, and it's a common weekend activity for families.
I think that's similar in a lot of countries. Football really is a global sport.
Yes, it's amazing how it connects people from all over the world, no matter their background.
Discussing multicultural cities.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever lived in a multicultural city?
Yes, I lived in London for a few years, and it's one of the most multicultural cities in the world. You can meet people from everywhere.
That's awesome. I visited London and I loved how diverse it was.
It's great because you can experience different cultures just by walking through different neighborhoods.
I agree. Do you think multicultural cities are more open-minded?
In many ways, yes. When people live alongside different cultures, they tend to become more accepting and curious about others.
I think that's one of the best things about living in a big city.
Absolutely. You learn so much just by interacting with people from different backgrounds.
Asking for directions in foreign countries.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever asked for directions in a foreign country?
Yes, when I visited Italy, I had to ask for directions a few times. It was a little challenging with the language barrier, but people were very helpful.
I've had the same experience.
It can be tough if you don't speak the language well.
Yes, but most people are patient, especially if you try a few words in their language. Even a simple ciao helps.
That's true. I think showing effort makes a big difference.
Absolutely. People appreciate it when you make an attempt to communicate, even if it's not perfect.
Discussing national cuisines.
Listen and practice.
What's the most famous dish from your country?
In Italy, pasta and pizza are probably the most famous, but there are many regional dishes that are just as important.
I love Italian food. In my country, burgers and fries are very popular, but I think our traditional food is less well-known globally.
Italian food is all about fresh ingredients and simplicity. It's amazing how much flavor you can get with just a few ingredients.
That's true. Italian cuisine has really influenced food around the world.
Yes, and it's nice to see how different countries have adapted Italian dishes in their own way.
Differences in public transportation systems.
Listen and practice.
How is the public transportation system in your country?
In Switzerland, public transportation is very efficient and always on time. Trains and buses are very clean and well maintained.
That sounds wonderful. In my country, public transportation can be less reliable, depending on where you are.
Yes, in Switzerland, punctuality is key. If the train says it arrives at 10:02, it will arrive exactly then.
I'd love to experience that. It makes travel so much easier when things run on time.
Yes, and because the system is so reliable, many people choose public transport over driving.
That's interesting. In my country, more people drive because public transport isn't as widespread.
It's different in Switzerland. Even in small towns, there's usually a bus or train connection nearby.
I think having a good public transport system really improves quality of life.
Absolutely. It's convenient, reduces traffic, and is better for the environment.
Do people in Switzerland use public transport for daily commutes or only for longer trips?
Both. It's common to use public transport for commuting to work, as well as for travel between cities.
I think more countries should invest in better public transport. It would help reduce pollution and traffic.
I agree. It's something that benefits everyone in the long term. Reliable transport is essential.
How to ask about religion respectfully.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever found it difficult to ask about someone's religion?
Yes, in Turkey, religion is a sensitive topic, so it's important to approach the conversation with respect and understanding.
That's true. In my country, we tend to avoid talking about religion unless we know someone well.
It's similar in Turkey. If you're interested in someone's beliefs, it's best to ask politely and show genuine curiosity.
How would you suggest starting a conversation about religion?
You could ask something simple like, "Do you follow any religious practices?" Or, "Can you tell me more about your beliefs?"
That's a good idea. I think it's important to be open-minded and non-judgmental.
Absolutely. Religion is a personal matter, so showing respect is the key to having a meaningful conversation.
Do people in Turkey talk about religion openly, or is it more private?
It depends on the person. Some people are open to discussing their faith, while others prefer to keep it private.
That makes sense. I think it's important to gauge the situation and follow the other person's comfort level.
Exactly. If someone doesn't want to talk about it, it's best to change the subject and respect their privacy.
I agree. Religion is such a personal topic, and it's important not to push for details.
Yes, and when approached thoughtfully, conversations about religion can lead to better understanding.
Introducing new colleagues from other cultures.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever worked with colleagues from different cultures?
Yes, in Germany, I've worked with people from all over the world. It's always interesting to see the different approaches to work and communication.
That's great. In my company, we also have colleagues from different countries. How do you usually introduce new team members?
We usually have a small meeting or gathering where the new person introduces themselves and talks about their background.
That's a good idea. Do you think it helps people feel more comfortable in the team?
Definitely. It's a nice way to break the ice, and it gives everyone a chance to learn about each other.
I think introducing new colleagues is important for building a welcoming environment.
Yes, and it's especially helpful when people come from different cultures. It helps bridge any gaps in communication.
Do people in Germany tend to be formal or casual in workplace introductions?
It's usually formal at first, but as people get to know each other, things become more relaxed. How about in your country?
We're more casual, even during introductions. It helps people feel at ease right away.
That sounds nice. Every culture has its own way of welcoming new team members, but the goal is the same.
I agree. Creating a positive atmosphere from the beginning makes a big difference.
Yes, and it helps the new colleague integrate smoothly into the team.
Explaining national pride and symbols.
Listen and practice.
What are some national symbols that represent your country?
In Canada, the maple leaf is a strong symbol. It's on our flag, and it represents our natural environment and national identity.
That's a beautiful symbol. In my country, the bald eagle is a symbol of strength and freedom.
I like that. Symbols can say so much about a country's values and history.
Exactly. National symbols really bring people together.
Yes, and they help people feel connected to their culture, no matter where they are.
Talking about public holidays.
Listen and practice.
What public holidays are celebrated in your country?
In Malaysia, we have many public holidays because of the different cultures. One of the biggest is Hari Raya, which celebrates the end of Ramadan.
That's wonderful. In my country, Christmas and New Year's are the major public holidays.
Yes, in Malaysia, we celebrate Christmas and New Year's too, but we also have Chinese New Year and Deepavali depending on the region.
I love how multicultural your country is. It must be great to experience so many different holidays.
It is. Everyone gets to enjoy different celebrations, and it brings people from various backgrounds together.
That sounds like a great way to learn about other cultures. Do people join in the celebrations even if they're not part of that religion?
Yes, it's common for friends and neighbors to join in the festivities, no matter their background. It's a way to show unity and respect.
That's amazing. In my country, people mostly celebrate their own holidays, but there's growing interest in learning about others.
I think that's happening everywhere. As the world becomes more connected, people are becoming more curious about other traditions.
I agree. Celebrating together helps create a more inclusive society.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding and appreciating each other's cultures.
Discussing language barriers.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever experienced language barriers while traveling or working?
Yes, when I traveled to France, I struggled a bit with the language. My French isn't very good, so it was hard to communicate sometimes.
I've had similar experiences. It can be really frustrating when you can't express yourself clearly.
Yes, but I found that even with basic phrases and gestures, people were willing to help.
That's good. I've found that showing effort goes a long way, even if your language skills aren't perfect.
Exactly. Most people appreciate it when you try to speak their language, even if you make mistakes.
Do you think it's better to learn a few key phrases before traveling?
Absolutely. Learning basic phrases like please, thank you, and where is can make a big difference in how smoothly things go.
I agree. It also shows respect for the local culture.
Yes, and it can lead to better interactions with locals. People are usually more open when you try to speak their language.
That's true. It's all about connecting with people, even if it's just with a few words.
Exactly. Language barriers can be challenging, but they can also be a learning experience.
Differences in personal and professional boundaries.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country separate personal and professional boundaries?
In Italy, work and personal life are often more connected. It's common for colleagues to socialize after work, and there's a strong focus on building personal relationships.
That sounds nice. In my country, people tend to keep work and personal life more separate. We don't often socialize with colleagues outside of work.
Yes, in Italy, it's different. Getting to know your colleagues on a personal level is seen as important for creating a good work environment.
I think that could really help build trust in the workplace.
Yes, it creates a sense of camaraderie, which can make working together easier.
Do you think it ever becomes difficult to keep work and personal issues separate?
Sometimes, yes, but most people manage to find a balance, and it's seen as part of creating a supportive work culture.
In my country, there's more emphasis on maintaining professional distance.
That's interesting. Every culture has its own way of defining those boundaries.
I agree. It's important to understand the balance wherever you work.
Exactly. Knowing when to be professional and when to be personal helps in any work environment.
How to complement across cultures.
Listen and practice.
How do people usually give compliments in your country?
In Brazil, people often compliment appearance or how someone is dressed. It's seen as friendly and open.
That's nice. In my country, we also give compliments, but sometimes people can feel awkward about it.
Yes, in Brazil, compliments are very casual. You might compliment a stranger on their shoes or outfit.
That's great. I think being open with compliments helps build connections.
Exactly. It's a way of breaking the ice and making people feel good.
Describing a traditional festival.
Listen and practice.
Can you tell me about a traditional festival in your country?
Sure. In Mexico, we celebrate Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. It's a colorful festival where we honor our ancestors.
That sounds amazing. How do people celebrate it?
Families create altars with photos and favorite foods of their loved ones. We also visit cemeteries and decorate graves with marigolds.
It seems like such a beautiful way to remember those who have passed.
Yes, it's not a sad event. It's joyful, with music, dancing, and sharing stories about the departed.
Do people wear special clothing for the celebration?
Some people dress as skeletons, wearing makeup to look like calicas, skulls, which is a symbol of death and rebirth.
That's fascinating. In my country, we don't have anything quite like that.
It's a unique part of Mexican culture, and it's becoming more popular around the world.
I've always wanted to experience it in person. The colors and decorations look beautiful.
You should. It's a wonderful way to celebrate life and death together with family.
I think it's a very meaningful tradition. It must feel special to connect with your ancestors like that.
It really is. It reminds us that even though they're gone, they're still part of our lives.
Discussing the role of family.
Listen and practice.
How important is family in your culture?
In Greece, family is the center of everything. We spend a lot of time with extended family, and family gatherings are very important.
That's wonderful. In my culture, family is also important, but we don't see extended family as often.
In Greece, we are very close to our grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. We often live near each other, or even together.
That sounds like a strong community. Do people usually live with their parents until they're older?
Yes, it's common to live with your parents until you're married, or even after that in some cases. Family ties are very strong.
In my country, most people move out once they become adults, but we still visit family regularly.
It's similar in Greece, but the expectation to stay close to family is stronger. Family is the first priority.
That's a great way to maintain connections. Do families often make decisions together?
Yes, major decisions, like moving or changing jobs, are often discussed with the whole family. Everyone's opinion matters.
I like that. It must feel supportive to have everyone involved.
It is. Family provides a strong support system, and we know we can always rely on each other.
Talking about volunteering in other countries.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever volunteered in another country?
Yes, I volunteered in Kenya for a few months. I helped build schools in a rural area. It was a life-changing experience.
That sounds incredible. What was it like working in a completely different environment?
It was challenging at first, but the local community was very welcoming. I learned a lot about their culture and way of life.
I've always wanted to volunteer abroad. It seems like a great way to give back while learning.
It really is. You get to make a difference while also expanding your own perspective. It's a two-way experience.
Did you face any difficulties adjusting to the new environment?
Yes, the biggest challenge was the lack of resources. We had to be very creative with the materials we had.
I can imagine. How did you communicate with the local people?
English was widely spoken, but I also learned some basic Swahili to connect better with the community.
That's great. I think learning the local language is a big part of immersing yourself in the experience.
Absolutely. It shows respect, and it helped me build stronger relationships with the people there.
Global views on education and success.
Listen and practice.
How is success in education measured in your country?
In Germany, success is often measured by skills and practical knowledge, not just grades. There's a strong focus on vocational training.
That's a good approach. In my country, there's a lot of focus on getting high grades and going to university.
Yes, while university is important in Germany, vocational education is also highly respected.
I think that's something we could improve in my country. Not everyone needs to go to university to be successful.
Exactly. Different paths lead to success, and vocational skills are just as valuable as academic ones.
Managing cross-cultural projects.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever managed a project with people from different cultures?
Yes, I worked on a project with team members from Japan, Germany, and Brazil. It was a great learning experience.
That's amazing. How did you handle the cultural differences?
Communication was key. We had to be very clear about expectations and respectful of different working styles.
That's smart. I've heard that cultural misunderstandings can create challenges in international teams.
Yes, for example, in Japan, people are more indirect in communication, while Germans tend to be very direct. It took time to find a balance.
I can see how that would take some adjustment. Did you have regular meetings to keep everyone aligned?
Yes, we had weekly virtual meetings to ensure everyone was on the same page. Time zones were tricky, but we made it work.
It sounds like a complex but rewarding experience. What was the biggest lesson you learned?
The importance of flexibility. You have to adapt to different working styles and be open to new ideas.
How to show gratitude in different cultures.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country show gratitude?
In Japan, we often bow to show gratitude, especially in formal situations. The deeper the bow, the more respectful it is.
That's interesting. In my country, we usually just say thank you and maybe give a handshake.
Yes, in Japan, words are important, but the bow adds a physical gesture of respect.
I've seen videos of people bowing in Japan. It seems very formal.
It can be, but it's also common in everyday life. Even a small bow when receiving a gift or favor shows politeness.
That's a beautiful way to express thanks. Are there other ways people show gratitude in Japan?
Yes, giving gifts is another way, especially in business or after receiving help. The gift doesn't have to be expensive, but it shows appreciation.
In my country, giving thank you notes is quite common. It's a small gesture, but very appreciated.
That's similar to Japan. A handwritten note or a small token of appreciation is always valued.
Talking about traditional dance.
Listen and practice.
What kind of traditional dances are popular in your country?
In Argentina, tango is the most famous traditional dance. It's a passionate and intricate dance that represents our culture.
I've always wanted to learn tango. It looks so elegant.
It is. Tango is all about connection between the dancers. It's more than just the steps. It's about emotion and expression.
That sounds beautiful. Is tango still a big part of Argentine culture today?
Yes, tango is still very popular, especially in Buenos Aires. There are tango schools and milongas, dance halls, where people go to dance.
I would love to visit one of those dance halls. It must be an amazing experience.
It is. Even if you don't know how to dance, just watching is an experience in itself. The music and the atmosphere are incredible.
I think traditional dances are such a great way to connect with the history of a place.
I agree. Tango tells the story of Argentina's past, and it's a big part of our national identity.
Discussing social media trends globally.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country use social media?
In South Korea, social media is very popular, especially platforms like Instagram and KakaoTalk. It's a big part of daily life, especially for young people.
That's similar to my country. Instagram and Facebook are the most popular here.
Yes, but in South Korea, we also use a lot of local platforms, like Naver and KakaoTalk, which are different from global ones.
I've heard about KakaoTalk. Is it like WhatsApp?
Yes, it's similar, but it also has other features like games, shopping, and even banking services. It's more integrated into daily life.
That's so interesting. In my country, people use different apps for each of those things.
In South Korea, we like to have everything in one app. It's convenient and saves time.
I think the way social media is used can tell a lot about a culture.
Absolutely. It reflects what people value and how they communicate with each other.
Cultural differences in humor.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country approach humor?
In Australia, we love sarcasm and dry humor. Sometimes it's hard for people from other cultures to understand.
That's interesting. In my country, humor is more exaggerated and physical, like in Brazil.
Yes, I've noticed that. Australian humor can be very subtle, and sometimes people aren't sure if we're joking or not.
I think I'd struggle with that at first. Do people joke a lot at work, or is it more casual?
It depends, but we do use humor at work, especially to lighten the mood. It's a big part of Australian culture.
I think humor is a great way to connect with people, no matter the culture.
I agree. Even if the style is different, humor helps break the ice and build relationships.
How to negotiate across cultures.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever had to negotiate with people from different cultures?
Yes, I've negotiated with people from China and the US, and it was very different. In China, negotiations are more indirect and based on relationships.
That's interesting. In my country, negotiations are usually very direct and focused on getting a deal done quickly.
Yes, in China, it's more about building trust first. People don't rush into decisions, and it can take time.
I can see how that would require patience. Did you find it challenging?
At first, yes. But once I understood the importance of building a relationship, it became easier. You have to adapt to their pace.
That's a good lesson. I think flexibility is key when negotiating across cultures.
Absolutely. Every culture has its own approach, an understanding that is crucial to success.
Talking about indigenous cultures.
Listen and practice.
Are there many indigenous cultures in your country?
Yes, in Canada, we have several indigenous groups, like the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Their traditions and languages are an important part of our national heritage.
That's wonderful. In my country, we also have indigenous cultures, but they're not as well preserved.
In Canada, there's a strong movement to preserve indigenous languages and customs. Schools and communities are working to keep the traditions alive.
That's great to hear. What kind of traditions are celebrated?
One of the most important is the powwow, a gathering that includes traditional dancing, singing, and storytelling. It's a celebration of culture and history.
That sounds beautiful. I think it's so important to keep these traditions alive.
Yes, it's a way to honor the past and ensure that future generations understand their heritage.
Explaining the importance of tradition.
Listen and practice.
How important are traditions in your culture?
In India, traditions are very important. They're a big part of our daily lives, from the way we dress to the festivals we celebrate.
That's wonderful. In my country, traditions are important, but they're not as deeply rooted in everyday life.
In India, every region has its own customs and traditions, and they've been passed down for generations.
I think that's a beautiful way to stay connected to your roots.
Yes, It gives people a sense of belonging and helps preserve our cultural identity.
Do you think younger generations still value these traditions?
Yes, although they adapt them to modern life, the core values remain the same. Tradition is still very important in Indian society.
Exploring global pop culture.
Listen and practice.
How has global pop culture influenced your country?
In South Korea, global pop culture has had a big impact, but we've also created our own, like K-pop, which is now popular worldwide.
K-pop is huge in my country too. It's amazing how quickly it became a global phenomenon.
Yes, it's incredible to see how something that started in South Korea has spread all over the world.
Do you think global pop culture brings people together?
Absolutely. Music, movies, and fashion from different countries create a common language that people everywhere can relate to.
I agree. It's fun to see how cultures influence each other through pop culture.
Yes, and it shows how interconnected the world has become. We're all sharing and learning from each other.
How to ask about someone's culture.
Listen and practice.
How do you usually ask someone about their culture without offending them?
I think the best way is to ask politely and show genuine interest. For example, can you tell me more about your culture?
That's a good approach. I'm always worried about saying the wrong thing.
It's understandable, but as long as you're respectful, most people appreciate the interest. It's all about your tone and intention.
I agree. I think it's important to listen carefully and not make assumptions.
Exactly. Letting the other person share what they're comfortable with is key.
Do you find that people are open to discussing their culture?
Yes, most people enjoy talking about their background, especially if you show curiosity and respect.
Discussing tourism in other countries.
Listen and practice.
Have you ever been a tourist in another country?
Yes, I visited Thailand last year. It was amazing. The culture, food, and temples were incredible.
That sounds like a great trip. What was your favorite part?
Visiting the temples was definitely a highlight. The architecture and history are fascinating.
I've always wanted to visit Thailand. Did you find it easy to navigate as a tourist?
Yes, most people speak some English, and they're very welcoming to tourists. It was easy to get around.
That's good to know. I think being respectful as a tourist is important, especially in a different culture.
Absolutely. I made sure to follow local customs, like dressing modestly when visiting temples.
Sharing travel experiences.
Listen and practice.
Do you enjoy traveling?
Yes, I love traveling. I've been to several countries, including Italy, Japan, and Australia. Each place has its own charm.
That's amazing. What's been your favorite destination so far?
Japan was incredible. The mix of modern cities and traditional temples was fascinating. The food was also a highlight.
I've always wanted to visit Japan. Did you find it easy to communicate there?
Yes, people were very helpful, and even though I don't speak Japanese, I managed with a few basic phrases and gestures.
Describing famous landmarks.
Listen and practice.
What's a famous landmark in your country?
In Egypt, the pyramids of Giza are the most famous landmark. They're one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
I've always wanted to see the pyramids. What's it like to visit them?
It's an awe-inspiring experience. You can't believe how huge they are until you see them in person.
I can imagine. What's the history behind them?
They were built as tombs for the pharaohs around 4,500 years ago. It's amazing how they were constructed without modern technology.
Differences in hospitality expectations.
Listen and practice.
How do people in your country show hospitality?
In Saudi Arabia, hospitality is very important. Guests are treated with great respect, and it's common to offer food and tea as soon as they arrive.
That sounds lovely. In my country, we usually offer a drink, but it's not as formal.
In Saudi Arabia, hosting guests is seen as an honor, and it's important to make them feel comfortable and welcome.
I like that approach. It shows a lot of respect for the guest.
Yes, and it's a big part of our culture. Offering food, even if the guest doesn't stay long, is a must.
Global perspectives on gender identity.
Listen and practice.
How is gender identity viewed in your country?
In Sweden, there's a lot of openness and support for different gender identities. The government has strong policies to protect LGBTQ+ rights.
That's great. In my country, there's more discussion about gender identity now, but it's still a sensitive topic.
Yes, it's taken time, but Sweden is very progressive in this area. Schools and workplaces are becoming more inclusive.
That's important progress. I think education plays a big role in changing people's views.
Absolutely. The more people learn about gender identity, the more understanding and accepting they become.
Exploring different arts and crafts traditions.
Listen and practice.
What kind of traditional arts and crafts are popular in your country?
In Morocco, we're known for our beautiful hand-woven carpets, intricate pottery, and metalwork. Each piece tells a story of our culture.
I've seen pictures of Moroccan crafts. The colors and designs are stunning.
Yes, every region has its own style, and these crafts are passed down from generation to generation. They're a big part of our heritage.
I think handmade crafts are such a beautiful way to keep traditions alive.
I agree. They connect us to our history, and the craftsmanship is something we're very proud of.
Describing cultural identity.
Listen and practice.
How would you describe your cultural identity?
In Colombia, we have a mix of indigenous, African, and Spanish influences, so our culture is very diverse and colorful.
That's amazing. It must make your culture unique in many ways.
Yes, it influences everything from our music to our food. We take a lot of pride in our cultural diversity.
I love how different elements come together to create something new.
Exactly. It's what makes Colombia special. Our identity is all about embracing our history and moving forward.
Discussing national sports events.
Listen and practice.
What's the biggest sports event in your country?
In New Zealand, rugby is the national sport, and the Rugby World Cup is a huge event. The All Blacks are famous worldwide.
I've heard about the All Blacks. Rugby seems like such an exciting sport.
It is. The games are intense, and the haka, a traditional Maori war dance, is performed before every match.
That's incredible. I've seen videos of the haka. It's so powerful.
Yes, it's a way to honor Maori culture and show strength and unity before the game.